Hello and welcome back to our sustainable journey. I'm Steve. Today we're gonna make some worm bins, or at least a worm bin. I'll give you ideas on other types of worm bins you can make. So the hardest, I don't know what the hardest part, but the more difficult thing that people need to decide when they start getting into vermicompost is the type of bin. There's a lot of options out there. You can buy all sorts of products to make bins. I think that's silly. We just use tubs. So these are the tubs we use. It's literally that. I bought like 100 of these 5-10 years ago, something like that, and I still keep finding them in various places around the house and the farm, being used in other ways, because we don't use these normally for vermicomposting anymore, because we've gone to the big bins, which you can see over there. They're 4 foot by 4 foot bins. But for just starting out, something like this is perfect. Now, this isn't the only answer. These tubs, these ones are huge. I don't know what these ones are. Those are 27 gallon versus the 15 gallon. Some people use cement mixing trays. Some people use just a 5-gallon bucket. There's nothing wrong with just using a 5-gallon bucket. Whatever works to get the waste out of landfills, because the reason we do this is because if you send all of your food scraps through your garbage, where they end up is they end up in a sealed landfill. Well, all those nutrients, all those microbes, all that compost that can be made from that is lost, because they do not ever harvest landfills to make compost or anything else. They basically cover it up, they bury it, and they forget about it. So it's never to be seen again. So putting your food scraps in the garbage is a terrible idea, because they can never be used again. Versus vermicompost, or just in compost in general. Like, there's nothing wrong with composting in general. Sorry, I'm getting eaten alive by bugs right now. So there's nothing wrong with compost in general, or any of the other options that are out there. There's those bins that will, I don't know what they're like, the kobashi or whatever they're called. Those types of things, just fine. Any of those options are great. For worm bins, you need to be a little bit more diligent than just throwing it in a pile, making sure you have enough greens and browns. You need to focus a little bit, and we actually have a plane. I don't know if you'll be able to see this. Seriously. I thought it was the cicadas that were annoying. Anyway, so you have to be a little bit more diligent with the worm bin, but not that much more diligent than a compost pile. You just balance it out and check on it every once in a while, and make sure that you're not overfeeding or underfeeding or anything like that. You're fine. So, to get success, there's a couple different ways to make a bin. I've always done these with holes in them, so you can see, I don't know if you'll be able to see these holes along the top. Not fancy, nothing fancy at all. Just took a drill bit, drilled a bunch of holes along the top, and that is for air, so we get airflow. Because what I do is I stack these, and then I also get holes in the bottom, so there's some in the corner and some in the middle, and that's to make sure that any high volumes of liquid get drained out. And then I just stack it in another one. Usually the air holes, you can see, are at the top, so they're still getting flow, plenty of flow of air. You can either do lid on or lid off. I do lid on because I stack them, but you could do lid off, and that's fine. Look at that, we made ourselves a worm bin, right? It's just that easy. And then you want put in bedding. So for us, we keep loads of cocoa coir. This is cocoa coir. What other material? I think that's all cocoa coir too in that old bin. This one has shredded cardboard mixed in. I think there's potting soil in there actually. We got this one from somebody else, but cocoa coir, shredded cardboard. That, I'm not sure what that one is. That is an old bin of something that I found when I was cleaning stuff up this last week. But keep it simple. Shredded cardboard is fine. Shredded paper, coffee grounds work in a pinch. Just not huge volumes of that stuff because that's a food. So then you just wet it and pop it in the bottom of the bin. So that's basically what I'm going to do next, is get this wet, put it in the bottom of the bin, and you're set. You've got your worm bin. Don't overthink it. I have seen, and I kind of like this idea, somebody not adding the worms for a week, letting the bin kind of stew and become its own little safe environment for the worms, and then add the worms the following week. So I'm going to put this bin together, and then next week we'll add worms. So let's get this bedding in there. All right, pull this out. Scoops. Scoop it in, like that's it. If you're buying cocoa coir from anyone, honestly, make sure you wet it down first and rinse it, because I've seen and had people tell me that there's high salt concentrations on some cocoa coirs depending on where you're getting it from. And you don't want that, because that would be bad for the worms. But that's all we did. So just a couple inches. That's more than enough. We're gonna wet it down a little bit, make it into like a paste consistency essentially. And then you're done. What you don't want to do, so like this would be a terrible worm bin because there are no air holes, right? Any worms that would have been in here, we moved out, but any worms that would be in here would die because there's no airflow in a bin like this, right? Your buckets. Buckets are fine. My issue is more the size and the volume, but for like a single person, this size is fine. You'd have to leave the lid off or pop holes in the lid so there's airflow. You need airflow. These ones are great. Cement mixing trays, these are good because obviously there's plenty of airflow on the top, but these ones you need to monitor to make sure that if you have other pets or animals, they're not digging in it, because worms are delicious to a lot of animals. And we had one of our old cats thought it was a litter box, so we had to pitch an entire worm bin. So things like that you got to be careful of. So let me go grab some water and we'll finish this thing off. Literally a pitcher of water. That's what we're gonna do. So we're just going to sprinkle it in there. So you can't overwater in a situation like this because we have the drain holes. So mix it up. We have whatever this thing is called. The other problem with cocoa coir that I found is it's like hydrophobic, so it does not like water. So sometimes it takes a bit to get it to the right consistency. There we go. That actually looks pretty good because you shouldn't need to add too much water to your worm bins. because you're adding food scraps. Food scraps have a lot more water in them than you realize. And so you should add water. Unless, sometimes with airflow, it dries out your bins. Sometimes if you add too much cardboard, it'll dry out your bin. Like these open bin designs, they can dry out. So in those situations, what we recommend is putting a layer of cardboard on top. So something like this. In the past, this one had some like a jewel bag essentially on top, and that's enough to hold the moisture in. So that's an option too. The other thing to keep in mind, the reason I like smaller bins like this is going to get heavy. Remember, you're adding 15 gallons of dirt. Eventually, I mean, eventually it'll be as heavy as dirt, right? So something like this big 27-gallon one, you're not going to be able to lift it because it's too heavy. We've tried those and they're a pain to move, which is why this is the size that I'm comfortable lifting. Back when I think I had 30 or 40 of them in my basement at one time, and I could shuffle them around easy enough. They weren't too heavy, so this is fine. The big ones, we can't even move those. You have to move those with the tractor. You can see them behind the cows back there. 5-gallon buckets are great because they're easy to transport. Because these get heavy. Because as the worms work through and make the vermicompost on the bottom and move up, it gets heavier and heavier as you add more food scraps. So over time, this will get, I usually stop when it's about halfway. But this will get so heavy that you cannot move it, and then you have a problem, and then you have to scoop out so that you're able to move it around. If you need to move stuff, if it's a bin you're never going to have to move, then yeah, of course, get the big tub or get the cement mixing tray. But if it's something you're never going to relocate, that's great. But if you are going to move it, go smaller, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. We have an audience. Hello, ladies. So there you go. You've now built a worm bin. Check out the video next week where we will add worms to this bin. I'm gonna let it sit for a week, and then we'll add the worms to it. So see you next time. That's not a good sign.